welcome to this edition of Six Semper Tyrannis News. I'm your host, Mark Matheny. It's kind of an emergency broadcast, and I just basically want to go over all of the developments that are taking place now in Ukraine. We know that less than 24 hours ago, President Putin invaded the Ukraine. So we are going to start looking at that some. If you are seeing this broadcast, please like, share, and subscribe. Please share it with some other people that you know so we can get the broadcast out. And hopefully the streaming and everything will do well today. So far, it looks like it is, but there are a lot of things happening last night. You know, it was kind of a surprise to most of the free world, in the world in general, that Putin decided to just go ahead and move into the Ukraine. I mean, we had been seeing him posturing around the Ukraine, and we know that he had some reasons for it. Basically, he was saying that the Ukrainians, West Ukraine, was infringing upon Eastern Ukraine, and that the Donbass region, or the Donetsk and Lugansk region, were calling for help from Putin against what they were calling aggressors from the West, Western Ukraine. Now, there's I'm going to go over a bunch of stuff in no certain order, and I just ask that you kind of bear with me on it. But the Western media, that's one of the things that, they have failed to do, is they have failed to report that the population in eastern Ukraine had been asking Vladimir Putin to send Russian troops to save them basically from what they call the American-backed invaders, which would be Western Ukraine, because they're saying their contention is the United States helped to carry out a coup in 2014 and set up an anti-Russian government that then became very anti-Russian and very Nazi-like, they say, toward the Donbass region. So this is why Vladimir Putin is saying he has launched special military operations in the Ukraine on late into the night, going into Thursday morning, basically. It started late last night. And that includes cruise and ballistic missile attacks, and they have started targeting infrastructure near some of the major cities such as Kiev and Kharkiv and Mariupol and Dnipro and other areas. And these are according to various news reports. So this is what's happening. And so once that started taking place, today, President Biden, or if you want to call him president, I'll call him the illegitimate President Biden, but he came out, and so what they are doing is they are putting sanctions against Russia. They're calling them strong sanctions. They don't seem to be very strong, but here is the report of, this is when Biden was on the news today, came out with his condemnation of Russia for invading Ukraine, and he gave basically a list of sanctions that are going to be carried out by the United States and NATO allies, basically, against Russia. So here is that report now.
And at the very moment that the United Nations Security Council was meeting to stand up for Ukraine's sovereignty, to stave off invasion, Putin declared his war. Within moments, missile strikes began to fall on historic cities across Ukraine. Then came the air raids, followed by tanks and troops rolling in. We've been transparent with the world. We've shared declassified evidence about Russia's plans and cyber attacks and false pretexts so that there could be no confusion or cover-up about what Putin was doing. Putin is the aggressor. Putin chose this war, and now he and his country will bear the consequences. Today, I'm authorizing additional strong sanctions and new limitations on what can be exported to Russia. This is going to impose severe cost on the Russian economy, both immediately and over time. We have purposely designed these sanctions to maximize the long-term impact on Russia and to minimize the impact on the United States and our allies. And I want to be clear, the United States is not doing this alone. For months, we've been building a coalition of partners representing well more than half the global economy. 27 members of the European Union, including France, Germany, Italy, as well as the United Kingdom, Canada, Japan, Australia, New Zealand, and many others, to amplify the joint impact of our response. I just spoke with the G7 leaders this morning, and we're in full and total agreement. We will limit Russia's ability to do business in dollars, euros, pounds, and yen to be part of the global economy. We'll limit their ability to do that. We're going to stunt the ability to finance and grow the Russian military. We're going to impose major, and we're going to impair their ability to compete in high-tech 21st century economy. We've already seen the impact of our actions on Russia's currency and the ruble, which early today hit its weakest level ever in history. The Russia stock market plunged today. The Russian government's borrowing rate spiked by over 15%. In today's actions, we've now sanctioned Russian banks that together hold around $1 trillion in assets. We've cut off Russia's largest bank, a bank that holds more than 1/3 of Russia's banking assets by itself, cut it off from the U.S. financial system. And today, we're also blocking 4 more major banks. That means every asset they have in America will be frozen. This includes VTB, the second largest bank in Russia, which has $250 billion in assets. As promised, we're also adding the names to the list of Russian elites and their family members that we're sanctioning as well. As I said on Tuesday, these are people who personally gain from the Kremlin's policies, and they should share in the pain. We will keep up this drumbeat of those designations against corrupt billionaires in the days ahead. On Tuesday, we stopped the Russian government from raising money from U.S. or European investors. Now we're going to apply the same restrictions to Russia's largest state-owned enterprises, companies with assets that exceed $1.4 trillion. Some of the most powerful impacts of our actions will come over time as we squeeze Russia's access to finances and technology for strategic sectors of its economy and degrade its industrial capacity for years to come. Between our actions and those of our allies and partners, we estimate that we'll cut off more than half of Russia's high-tech imports. It'll strike a blow to their ability to continue to modernize their military. It'll degrade their aerospace industry, including their space program. It'll hurt their ability to build ships, reducing their ability to compete economically. And it will be a major hit to Putin's long-term strategic ambitions. And we're preparing to do more.
Yeah, he's preparing to do more, all right. Like Charles in World War III, possibly. But basically, most of the experts who are analyzing this are saying that these sanctions are not going to do anything, people. I mean, we've been sanctioning Russia. We've been hitting them with sanctions, and they are tough, and they're not going to be moved by it. They have worked on their military over the last few years. They have strengthening their military and upgrading their military, and they have saved their money for a rainy day, such as the invasion of Ukraine. So some of the things I want to do is go over a few things. There is an account that, you know, Vladimir Putin stated basically when he pushed the special military operations into eastern Ukraine on Thursday, he basically was saying that he didn't intend to occupy Ukraine, but he wanted to demilitarize and denazify Ukraine. This was his words. And he was talking about the Donetsk and the Lugansk regions primarily. And so everybody thought, okay, he's only going to move into, he's sending peacekeepers in, he said first. But then he started moving more troops into that area and then stated that he was going to do full military operations. And Joe Biden has now basically written a statement saying that Russia had, this was last night too, Russia had chosen a premeditated war that'll bring catastrophic loss of life and human suffering, and the prayers of the entire world are with the people of Ukraine tonight as they suffer an unprovoked and unjustified attack by Russian military forces. But here's the thing. That isn't necessarily the case, and Biden's assessment is basically wrong if you consider that Russia has been basically provoked over an 8-year period of time. The last 8 years, there's been different provocations. And so, look, I'm not sitting up here to try to defend Russia per se. What I want to talk about is I want to talk about this push for globalism and a new world order. And we have started to see draconian measures here in the United States being implemented because of a certain crisis, and certain scenarios that they took, measures that they took during that time. And now we're seeing in Canada the attack on the truckers. Now we're seeing National Guard troops being mobilized in Washington, D.C. because we are going to have truckers coming into there to protest certain mandates and things. And so I want to go back a little bit. Back in 2014, in February, you got to remember the United States supported the overthrow of Ukraine's pro-Russian leader, Viktor Yanukovych. And after he spurned an International Monetary Fund loan that came with conditions. So he turned down the International Mafia Federation and the loans that they wanted to give him. And then after that, he got overthrown. And if you ever read, there's a book called The Confessions of an Economic Hitman. They talk about how the IMF does this, how, these global elites utilize the IMF and things to go into these countries and basically give them loans they can't pay back and then basically take control of those countries. And so when Viktor Yanukovych would not take the loan from the International Mafia Federation, as I call them, or the International Monetary Fund, then he was overthrown. And the United States, since that time, has been providing extensive military aid and training to the Ukrainian armed forces as they have been brutalizing the people of eastern Ukraine who voted to secede from Ukraine after the 2014 coup. So after that, the United States started applying, all of these sanctions, extensive sanctions against Russia. And, some believe that, that has made Putin bitter and has made him react in the way possibly that he's reacting. And Biden's claim that, the Russian invasion was unprovoked is also undercut by the fact that Ukraine precipitated the war by attacking the breakaway eastern provinces in violation of the Minsk peace agreements. So all of this has been going on over the last 8 years. So it's not like all of a sudden Putin woke up one day and said, I'm going to now, today's the day. He spun a wheel and he said, okay, I'm going to go invade the Ukraine now. It's been mounting. And Russia reported on Monday that it had captured a Ukrainian soldier and killed 5 others after they crossed into Russian territory in Rostov, just over the border with Ukraine, and several hundred American mercenaries were also reported to have arrived in Ukraine last week. And there's even reports that I've seen in the news that, yes, we do have some soldiers in Ukraine, although Biden and them have said we're not going to put American soldiers in the Ukraine. But we have, like, there was one report that he said 300 or so. And so there was some evidence, they say, of this. There was what they're reporting is an American special ops guy and photojournalist Patrick Lancaster provided photographic evidence of this Ukrainian army shelling of a school in Donbass last week as well, earlier this week, I should say. But let me show you this picture. This is a reported picture of an American soldier, special ops guy in Ukraine. And this is what Russia is saying, is that the United States has had special operations guys in Ukraine working there. So this is part of the contention. And this is the picture here. So this is what they're saying. They're saying that this picture here is reportedly of a spec ops guy in the Ukraine who is an American soldier in the Donbass region. And also, like I said, there is a report as well of photographic evidence of a Ukrainian army shelling a school. Now, I'm going to show you that report here. This report was from February 21st, just a couple days ago.
And right now we are in the Kievsky district of Donetsk, the capital of the anti-Ukraine government, Donetsk People's Republic forces. And now, as you can see behind me, all these windows here are broken. That's because this school number 65 here was hit by Ukrainian shelling. The residents tell us it was a diversant group that fired on this location. This is a second school. And also a man's lost his life. Now we can see the impact here behind me. We're told that this school has been hit already 3 times, and all these windows have been replaced 3 times by Ukrainian shelling. How much longer do these civilians have to live through this constant attack from Ukrainian territory? We're going to keep showing you everything we can, so stand by, and there's a lot more to come. More reports. Что произошло?
Час 15 прилетело 2 снаряда, 2 огромных взрыва было. Вот. Дом содрогнулся, вот я живу здесь.
So, I don't know what this lady is saying. Obviously, she's speaking in Russian or Ukrainian. But they're basically stating that these schools have been hit by the Ukrainians, and this is in the Donbass region. So Western media has tried to portray the idea that the attacks are all coming from the pro-Russian separatists attacking the Ukraine Western side, but that's not necessarily the case. And so that's why I wanted to show you that. That's just one report. But also, his report has been corroborated by the Organization for Security and Cooperation in Europe maps that show the shellings that violate ceasefire arrangements have been indeed carried out by mostly the Ukrainian government. And this is what they're saying, is that it's been carried out mostly by the Ukrainian government. I'll pull that map up right here, and this will show you the violations they're talking about, where the ceasefire agreements have been violated by the Ukrainian side. They're stating anyway. This is what the reports are showing. So here is map 2. And let me see if I can pull that up for you so you can see it a little better. So this is the map, and this is from the Organization for Security and Cooperation in Europe Special Monitoring. They're stating that the ceasefire violations observed by this organization, Security and Cooperation, on February 18th of 2022. And so you can see these are this is the border where the ceasefire is supposed to be, and they're stating that most of the violations, according to this map, are from the side of Western Ukraine against the Donbass region. And so that's what their reports are claiming. So I thought that was interesting and worth noting. Also, there was a resident of the Kivsky district in the city of Donetsk whom this journalist Lancaster interviewed, Zoya Tumanova, and she said that the Ukrainians had shelled her village often since 2015 and burned about half of it down. And she asked Lancaster, when will it end? When will Putin come? When will he come and save us? So this is the Donetsk region. These are the pro-Russian separatists, like I say, who were stating that they were calling for Russia's intervention. And this is what Vladimir Putin basically was stating too. So Tumanova's viewpoint is completely absent from the U.S. media. They're not showing it in the U.S. media, but the reason why they're not showing these reports, hey, Sam Lee, if you're watching, Sam Lee, I see you on the chat. If you're watching this, the Western media are not showing any aggressions, and they're not talking about the coup that took place in 2014 to throw out Yanukovych after he refused to accept IMF loans, and they put in a anti-Russian president. They don't want to tell you about that because it contradicts the official narrative of, Vladimir Putin as a maniacal aggressor. And I was listening to Glenn Beck this morning, and Bill O'Reilly was on there. And Bill O'Reilly was saying, Putin's a nut. Putin's crazy. Putin's not crazy at all, people. He might be crazy like a fox, but he's not crazy. The man is analytical. The man knows what he's doing. He's strong. He's firm. Does that mean I like Putin? No, not necessarily. But I'm just telling you, you have to see both sides of this picture to get a proper understanding of what's happened. And it seems like the Western powers are the ones pushing this aggression toward a bigger conflagration, a bigger conflict, possibly resulting in world war. It could very well happen. And so, they're leaving this impression that the people of eastern Ukraine want Putin to send Russian troops to save them from the real aggressors. This is exactly what it looks like is the case. They're saying that Western Ukraine has been aggressors against the groups that have broke away. And so the Donbass region, which is in the southeastern portion of Ukraine, pro-Russian separatists were asking for help. At least this is the report of Vladimir Putin, and this is the report of those people in that area. And, so Vladimir Zelensky, who is the Ukrainian leader, stated that they did not shell these schools. But when they asked this woman, Tumanova, who lives there, who's been getting shelled since 2015, she stated that they always lie. She said, we know it is them shelling because no one can but them. Though I don't know how they can do that to their own Ukrainian people. We used to live together and communicate. And so this is the big problem. And the Eastern Ukrainians, the pro-Russian separatists, are saying basically they're being treated like second-class citizens. That's part of the reason that Vladimir Putin is saying that they went in to protect that region. So but they went in and hit these schools, and also the Ukrainians, the eastern Ukrainians, pro-Russian separatists, are saying that it was not them who fired the first shots, that it was Western Ukraine firing shots first. And this is the reason, because Putin was stating, remember last night, that he was simply sending peacekeepers in to secure the area of the Donbass region. And now they're claiming that it was attacks by Western Ukrainians first. There were a lot of reports and videos showing these attacks on the Donbass citizens and civilian infrastructure. And so that's part of the reasons why Vladimir Putin is justifying his invasion of the Ukraine at this time. And so that's why, again, like I said, I'm not necessarily trying to take the side of Russia. I'm simply trying to give both viewpoints so that you can have a better picture and understanding of what's happening. The Western mainstream media, especially the leftist media, who has this hatred for Russia, automatically just want to say that, Putin just woke up in the morning, drank himself some vodka, and decided he's going to go attack the Ukrainians. So, and for one thing, since the U.S.-led West and the U.S. puppet regime in Kiev have de facto very differently censored most news reports about the atrocities of the Kiev army and their militias, there really wasn't any chance for the average news consumer in the United States to have any knowledge about these atrocities. So most people think that the Western Ukrainians are just sitting over there building their little houses and being so nice and kind, while those who broke away in the Donbass region are just a bunch of thugs and gangsters, and they're trying to, attack the Ukraine or something. But they're not talking in Western media about all these atrocities that have been reported in the Donbass region, and they're claiming that they have been carried out by Ukrainian soldiers and militia groups. And so there was, though, Putin made a speech relating to the recognition of the Donbass republics, and that does point out that Kiev has been consistently attacking innocent civilians since 2014. Since that breakaway, the Ukraine has been trying to recapture the Donbass region with help from the United States, because they've been backing them. And this is, my opinion, is why Biden and Obama and all of them were there, setting up this anti-corruption group, giving $1.8 billion over there, funneling it over there so that they could fund the Ukrainian groups to take back the Donbass region. And of course, Putin saw this and understood this, and obviously he doesn't want Ukraine to become a part of NATO because it's right there up on against his country, against his borders, and he said that would be a matter of national security concerns. So, but there's been a lot of censorship here in the United States, and what it's done, it's brainwashed Western civilization and Western publics to basically think Russia is the source of all of these evils in the Ukraine, and that the United States is supposedly supporting Ukraine. But you can kind of see how good they're supporting Ukraine. Biden basically said he'd say a prayer for the Ukraine as he's being invaded. He's like, we're going to pray for you. And these sanctions aren't really doing anything. But Biden has already stated they're not going to send troops in. Although we do have special ops there, we do have some troops in the Ukraine. But at the same time, pretty much every year after that U.S. invasion of the Maidan Square in Kyiv in 2014, the coup, then Kiev fell to the very last rank in their GDP. and it became pretty much the poorest country in Europe. And so they're portraying good as evil and evil as good, basically. And what the United States did after that was basically told Ukraine and Kiev to cut out all of the business deals and contracts with Russia and to shut down the Soviet-built factories, basically turning the Ukraine into a debt slave to the IMF. And now they're in debt to the International Monetary Fund, or the International Mafia Federation, as I call it. And so they're being used, unfortunately. And so, but that's part of the history in one of the shows that I did called The Truth About the Russian-Ukrainian conflict, because that overthrow in 2014 really started that. And our Western media is not really covering that. They're pushing anti-Russian narratives. They want to weaken Russia economically and politically and see it disintegrate back to the 1990s. So, that's one of the things that you have to kind of understand. I want to show you also some of the Ukrainian soldiers have been photographed, and I want you to see this as well. This is a photograph of a couple of the Western Ukrainian soldiers under Zelensky, and they're wearing helmets, Kevlar helmets, but I want you to see what's on their helmets. This is a photograph of two different soldiers in Western Ukraine in their military. And look at the helmets. I'm going to blow this up a little bit so you can see it. If you see the helmets, they have an SS and Nazi stickers on their helmets. And these are two Western Ukrainian soldiers. So this is why, Putin was calling them Nazis, because they're basically wearing Nazi regalia on their helmets. If this photograph is authentic, and I believe it is, this is from NBCnews.com. So again, the rhetoric, the West is calling Putin's, his speeches, they're saying he's just using rhetoric. Yeah. And that's exactly what it is. They have basically Nazi stickers on their helmets, SS and the Nazi flag on the Western Ukrainian helmets. These are the ones who are persecuting and attacking the pro-Russian separatists in the Donbass region because they decided to break away because they felt they were second-class citizens. And Biden pretty much wants war in the Ukraine, but it's really not in the interest of the Ukraine to go to war. And we can see right now, we know that they're going to lose. The Ukrainians are going to lose. They have some support. They've got weapons and stuff being supplied to them. They've got some American special ops guys in there probably helping them to decide on how they're going to fight this against Russia and so on. But they're going to fall. And so that's one of the things. But I just wanted to show you that it is more than likely Russia is doing this out of self-preservation, or at least their perceived self-preservation, people. And the West is trying to draw us into this bigger war. Now we have problems, possibly with China looking and salivating over Taiwan, where we have all these semiconductors for essential components that we need here in the United States. And now we're seeing China is now backing Russia basically and basically standing with them. So as we put sanctions on Russia, it's more than likely Russia may seek help from China with supply support and so on and things of this nature. And then that will in turn may force the United States to then try to put sanctions on China, which is just going to be adding fuel to the fire, basically. So sooner or later, we may be in a big world war, it looks like. And of course, this escalation could be to Biden and his regime's benefit, because right now, all of the economy, the inflation was just skyrocketing, gas prices skyrocketing, the economy is worsening, people are feeling this, and now Biden and them can turn and blame big bad Putin and Trump, because recently, Trump came out and said what Putin did was genius. I mean, it was a genius move. Well, now the MSN News and all them are saying, oh, look, Trump is praising Putin. He wasn't praising Putin. He was complimenting the strategy that Putin used, because it was a smart move to say that you're going to be a peacekeeper, taking the role kind of that NATO would take and moving in and then, boom, springing your surprise invasion. It was a genius move. Doesn't mean you have to like Putin to say that. Just like Hitler was pretty ingenious, pretty smart, but nobody liked him. Hell, I'm a Jew. I don't like Hitler. But let's look at two different possibilities. One possibility is that these puppeteers in Washington are pushing this escalation, and that provides a distraction from their horrible performance that they are doing right now, and all the irredeemable problems with the economy and fuel prices and the border and all of these things. So now there's a distraction. The other possibility could be that the crazy neo-Nazis in the Western Ukraine are just deciding they're going to try to go in and take back the Donbass region, and they're doing it on their own. But more than likely, it's backed by the United States, in my opinion. So what would be these consequences? We know that with these sanctions that Biden is putting on and shutting down the Nord Stream 2 pipeline, of course, that somewhat is going to hurt Russia because they are selling that, but then Russia could turn around and sell that energy to China probably, or someone else. Some other rogue country that, sides with Russia. But it's hurting Europe as well, because they are relying upon that energy from Russia. So Putin said, told Germany and Europe to enjoy your $2,000 a month bills now, because your energy prices are going to skyrocket exponentially. And then, of course, you think about it, Biden shut down. We used to be net exporters of energy, and now he shut down the pipeline here, and basically is shutting down our energy. So there's no way he can help out Europe with energy. So Dmitry Medvedev, who was the deputy chair of the Russian Security Council, he made a tweet. He said, German Chancellor of Olaf Scholz ordered a halt to the certification of the Nord Stream 2. He says, well, welcome to the new world where Europeans will soon pay 2,000 euros per 1,000 cubic meters of gas. And also, the green, clean energy and all these things. They're talking about the green movement and all this nonsense. These people are going to be paying exponentially. So Russia is not going to be the only ones hurting. And possibly here, too, we're seeing, gas prices escalating as well. And, in Europe, they don't have nuclear energy. So this green energy garbage is not going to replace fossil fuel. It's going to be too expensive. So really, I think that this is going to hurt Europe, and so, how are they going to deal with that? Zelensky, in other news, I'll show you real quick. President of Ukraine says 137 killed on the first day of the Russian invasion, and he's ordering general mobilization. It says President Vladimir Zelensky says 137 Ukrainians died Thursday after his country came under a large-scale attack from Russian forces. Today we have lost 137 of our heroes, our citizens, military and civilian, Zelensky says in a video address, adding another 316 people who have been injured. And then also in that news, 26 minutes ago, Zelensky signs a decree ordering general mobilization of the military and calls up reserves. He's calling upon the citizens and telling them, we'll give you a weapon if you come and sign up. Come to sign up and fight. And then he's calling on EU leaders as well. And you'll notice they're pretty much silent. We're not seeing any NATO forces. We're not seeing the United States, any of them intervening. But Zelensky was calling on European leaders to stand side by side with Ukraine to stop Russia. It says Ukraine's President Vladimir Zelensky calls on the leaders of the European Union who held an emergency summit on Thursday to stand side by side with Ukraine and stop the aggressor. And I think he probably wants more than just some tweets that we stand with Ukraine. That ain't really helping anything with Ukraine. In a statement published on his page in the messaging app in Telegram, Ukraine's leaders call for powerful economic and financial sanctions on Russia, including cutting off SWIFT and imposing an embargo on oil and gas. So, and that's, and then Biden did come out and push their sanctions. But that's what's happening so far. Also, I'm going to show you some footage. This is just some different footages of what is happening in the Ukraine right now. So we're going to take a look at some of these. Let me pull these up. This is...
Ladies and gentlemen, Mike Lindell is offering 60% off on his top-of-the-line Giza Dream.
I've always got stuff popping up when I don't want stuff popping up. Here is...
Situation is become very, very, very bad.
This is from Band.video. And this is in Kharkiv. About 13 hours ago, people were in lines waiting for food as the invasion ensues. And you can see some smoke in the background from some of the bombing and attacks. There's tanks moving through the city, personnel carriers and things. And again, this is in the city of Kharkiv.
All good.
Now, this is in
the Dnipro.
Dnipro.
People are walking, roaming around. Vehicles are on the road, and we are going to buy some stocks, some water. All are okay till now in the Dnipro. See the rush. Look behind.
Ooh. And this is Russia versus Ukraine. That's all my friends. ये लाइन सिर्फ वो छोटे एटीएम की है जो कभी यूज़ नहीं होती थी और आज वो एटीएम में से सारे लोग As you can see, I'm in the supermarket. Everything is finished. I'll show you the Here you can see the line. Loads and loads of people are standing in a queue.
So you can see the
Hoi hoi hoi, Russia, Ukraine.
disparity there already. And this is in Kiev.
ये देखो राशन लेने के लिए लाइनें नोवस में.
See a lot of the buildings with the emergency vehicles going.
Metro is opened, it's for free, can travel anywhere.
And you can hear the sirens, the emergency sirens in the background there. Let me show you some more. This is thousands of Russians protesting Putin's war in Moscow and in St. Petersburg. So there is some Russians protesting actually in Russia.
This is my pillow and Mike Lindell's flagship
protesting
product.
against the war, which I thought was interesting. Let's go to that. This is in Russia. Russians protesting against the war. Thousands of Russians. So not all the Russians are for the war. You know, again, that's another misperception that the West would probably have you believe that like all the Russians are just cheering the invasion of Ukraine. But actually, it looks like there are thousands of them that do not want this war escalation either. So that's just some of the footage in Russia that was happening late last night into today.
We are fighting the new world order at point blank range. I am absolutely going up against the worst people at every level. And it's only been your prayers, your support that's kept us on air. And so I'm telling you.
Also, there was some footage of, there's a video that they were showing a tank and some footage of exploded vehicles and things of that nature. Let me pull that up here. And that is right here. This is in somewhere in the Ukraine region. A dead soldier, an exploded tank, and some other personnel vehicles. But it doesn't say which side.
Fighting the new world order at point blank range. I am absolutely going up against the worst people.
That's just another video. So there's a lot of footage coming out of that area right now. Here is a video of some citizens who are outside in Ukraine almost being struck by some missiles. Let me set that one up here real quick. Yeah, this video is somewhere in nearby. It says a video of an unknown source showing what appears to be Ukrainian citizens huddled indoors when almost getting struck by a missile. Let me set that one up now. So here is that video.
Я не бачу. Ой, Давай, Игорь! Давай. Игорь! Побежали. Давай.
Подвал!
Все тапочки. Вещи.
Вот что творят.
And then you've seen that. You can see the flames on that one hitting only a couple hundred yards away from their apartment.
Попали нам в газопровод. Во, подлюки.
Of course, then you could...
Лупят по нашему дому, по 32-му дому. О, скоты. Загорелся у нас газ. Вон, видите? Загорелся газ.
I mean, imagine if that missile hits that place, they're done. They're hit. Shelling just coming that close to their place, their residence. Imagine that, people.
Вот, вот.
You know, we're here in our country, and we don't really think about things like that. But imagine a war coming to our soil and us having to deal with the same things.
We are fighting the New World Order at point blank range. I am absolutely going up against the worst people at every level.
These are some of the footages that they put together. So here's a Russian tank moving into the Ukraine, and they are raising their flags on the government buildings in Ukraine. The Russians are. So let me pull that one up.
Ladies and gentlemen, Mike Lindell is offering 60%
Mike Lindell's offering
on his
some
top of the line Giza Dream Sheets.
Here, that's not what we want to see. Okay, here is that footage of these tanks moving into the Ukraine. These are Russian tanks moving in.
Вот основные войска подходят. Без опознавательных знаков. Улыбаются ребята.
And these are people evacuating the city, obviously, for obvious reasons. That's at InfoWars again. They had some good compilations.
We are fighting the New World Order at point blank range. I am absolutely
to show you the realities of war, people. This is what we need to understand, that the Biden administration right now is carrying us dangerously closer to the precipice of World War III, possibly. And that's not rhetoric. That's not hyperbole, people. You don't know what they're going to do. You don't know if some of the ships out in the sea or one of these Russian tanks or something is, inadvertently goes into a NATO country. A missile goes off course and strikes one of our NATO allies there. Any of these things could possibly draw us into war with Russia. Now, here was Putin announcing his invasion. If you didn't see that, I'll play that right now. Excuse me.
Sold out for months. It's now back in stock.
Again,
the highest quality vitamin D3 with
selling his product, which I don't knock him for. But here is. Now listen to this, guys. This is Alex Jones talking a little bit about this possibility of war. Back in October of 2021.
Is war in February.
This was Alex Jones back at a couple cuts of where he was predicting that there possibly would be war with Russia.
Обстоятельства требуют от нас решительных и незамедлительных действий. Народные республики Донбасса обратились к России с просьбой о помощи.
People Republic asked for help from Russia in this regard, according to Article 51, Part 7 of the United Nations Charter.
7 Устава ООН.
with the consent of the Russian Federation Council in accordance with the ratified agreement February 22nd of this year on friendship and mutual aid with Donetsk People's Republic and Luhansk People's Republic. I decided to conduct a special military operation. This goal is the protection of the people who during 8 years suffer from abuse and genocide from the Kiev regime. Whoever would try to stop us and further creates a threat to our country, to our people, should know that Russia's response will be immediate and will lead you to such consequences that you have never faced in your history. We are ready for any outcome, he says.
Now, the Russian President Vladimir Putin is calling this a, quote, special military operation to protect Donbass. It is clearly bigger than that. Now, he made a surprise appearance on state television calling for the demilitarization of Ukraine, blaming the government in Kyiv for bloodshed, but said Russian forces are not planning an occupation.
Whoever tries to interfere with us, and even more so to create threats for our country, our people should know that Russia's response will be immediate and will lead you to such consequences that you have never experienced in your history.
Now, Ukraine's President Volodymyr Zelensky, he went on Facebook again to address the nation. He says he's imposing martial law but urged the country not to panic.
Today, each of you should stay calm. Stay at home if you can. We are working. The army is working. The whole sector of defense and security is working. No panic. We are strong. We are ready for everything. We will win over everybody because we are Ukraine.
And again, that was from clips from InfoWars or Band.video.
Anything of real quality, anything of lasting durability, anything that's really...
So I wanted to show you that. But on the Drudge Report, for example, there's a lot of developments. Again, I've shown you troops raising their Russian flags in the Ukraine. And the Chernobyl power plant has also been taken by the Russians as they have captured it. And, of course, the Kremlin is demanding that Kiev surrender as well. And of course, you heard what Vladimir Putin said against any powers that would come against him, that he's going to do some things that you've never seen in history. Who knows what that is, but that sounds like nuclear war, because that's something that hasn't been done really in history except for the, Hiroshima and Nagasaki, the hydrogen bombs. And also, again, there has been serious losses. There's been airstrikes in 25 cities in the Ukraine so far. And, of course, I said, Zelensky's calling upon all of his citizens to come to the aid of their country, basically, to fight. I also want to show you Sky News, basically, has a report out. They're basically saying there's a Russian invasion underway on multiple fronts. See, a lot of people were not aware until right after it started happening that it was coming from the north, from the east, and even from below the Ukraine. And so some of the key points they're stating at Sky News: Russia invades Ukraine with dozens killed. Chernobyl power plant seized. Boris Johnson announces new sanctions against Russia. NATO is saying we have war in Europe on a scale we thought belonged to history. And Vladimir Putin, of course, warning about the consequences that would never be seen in history if anybody tries to stop him. Joe Biden is saying no U.S. troops are going to fight in Ukraine. What is going on in Putin's mind? Well, like I said, I have a couple videos. If you haven't seen them, go to my Rumble channel. I'll pull it up. I have done a collection of videos on what is taking place in Russia and Ukraine areas right now, and kind of the history of it, kind of an analysis. So if you haven't seen those, take the time to go back and watch a couple of them, because that may help you to kind of understand what's happening. On there, I have some recent ones that I've done. Wars and Rumors of Wars, Globalist Push for World War III. The battle lines are drawn. Which side are you on? Situation update. Russia and France make a deal to de-escalate in the Ukraine, but apparently that didn't work out, right? And then another one was this one here, The Truth Behind the Russia-Ukraine Conflict, is a good video to watch to kind of give you a synopsis on what's going on. And Wars and Rumors of Wars kind of shows you the psychology behind it. People are saying, why would Putin do this? Well, this kind of breaks it down, and then his speech explains why he chose to make this move. So I'm not necessarily saying, oh, I'm for Putin. I'm just telling you, if you want to know why Putin did this, this video here, Wars and Rumors of Wars, will explain it, and also the truth behind the Russian-Ukraine conflict. So that's those are two videos at my Rumble channel you can check, and I will put a link down below this at the end of this. So right now, people, we are currently on DEFCON level 3. That's why you're seeing that on the screen. DEFCON level 3 warning in the warning systems. That's where we stand right now. DEFCON level 3 is kind of in the middle. It's 1 through 5. 1 being the lowest, or 5 being the lowest, and 1 being the highest. 1, if we were at DEFCON level 1, we'd be in nuclear war more than likely. We'd be being invaded or something. There would have to be a first strike against us. And so this DEFCON level is set up to kind of give you an idea to why, how these things are playing out. And the current DEFCON level is now at DEFCON 3 because of a raised CENTCOM due to the rocket attacks against U.S. bases and airstrikes carried about by the U.S. military, raised to EUCOM level due to the United States activating an artillery command in Europe as Russia amasses troops, and artillery near the Ukrainian border, and raised AFRICOM level due to ongoing conflicts in Ethiopia. So you have CENTCOM, you have EUCOM and AFRICOM, all these different threat levels basically that they have. And, and then they tell you why. But some of the reasons, some of the recent developments are, Russia has, of course, invaded. I want to show you a video real quick from Dabu 7 talking about the Snake Islands near Ukraine. He's stating that the Russians have taken Snake Islands. It's right off the coast of the Ukraine. Here is that report now.
This is Dabu 7. Russia has taken possession of Snake Island. This sits out in the Black Sea right off the coast of Ukraine and Romania. Now, when looking into this, it says that this island has been disputed between Ukraine and Romania for some time. When you look on Wikipedia, it states that Romania has 80% of the disputed maritime territory. That's what an international court ruled in 2009. So this is mostly Romania's territory here. Now, also in Ukraine, in this shot, it looks like forces blew up a bridge over the river of Oskol in the town of Sinkovo. This was to try to prevent Russia from encircling the entire area of Kharkiv. So that is a look at what they did there, with multiple strikes happening left and right all over the place. This island is strategic. We take a look here. can see where it's at, right across from Crimea. You can see Sevastopol's here. Odessa, Ukraine. This is all Ukraine down and around through here, and Snake Island sitting here. You can see how it's bordered. Right here is Romania. Romania, Ukraine. We also have breaking reports that more than 10,000 automatic rifles have been given to civilians to help defend Kiev, Ukraine's capital. So we've got big moves being made in Ukraine constantly with all this ongoing big blasts. I have other videos here on YouTube. I'll be posting on both channels, and I'll be posting live updates on Getter and Twitter as they're unraveling. Make sure to follow me there and hit that subscribe button for more. It's been Dabu7. Much love, y'all.
Dabu7. He's always got some pretty good reports.
One of the most
pretty
common
quick reports
combos.
and quick and to the point. But that is what's happening right now. Sky News is covering events. A lot of things happening, people. And that's
when you shop.
A lot of people are wondering if we are going to actually have be escalated into World War III. Well, my opinion is, in some ways, with these sanctions being put on the Ukraine, or on Russia, it is possible that if they just keep piling these sanctions on them, at some point, Russia may just decide that, they're going to just go into some of these other countries. It's hard to tell. Here is Reuters is also reporting, doing live updates on exactly what's happening in Ukraine right now. So I want to go to Reuters. Here is basically it looks pretty quiet in Kiev. They've got a shot of Kiev right now. Doesn't look like a whole lot of activity in the city of Kiev right now. But that's this is Reuters news. So they've just basically got a still, or a live camera shot of Kiev. Nothing really going on there.
When you shop Build with Ferguson, you don't.
This is Sky News. And Sky News pretty much is showing some of these
pictures from Kharkiv in the east.
Well.
Enormous blasts, also in the city of Dnipro. Air raid sirens blared across the capital. Ukrainian, we don't know which. This was to be a day of targeted attacks by the Russian forces.
Whoever tries to hinder us, and even more so to create threats to our country, to our people, should know that Russia's response will be immediate, and it will lead you to such consequences that you have never encountered in your history.
Kharkiv residents sought shelter from airstrikes in a subway station. Above ground, the aftermath. Shocked witnesses filmed this video of missiles hitting the Ivano-Frankivsk airport in the country's west. Russia appeared to be targeting essential infrastructure, helicopter gunships hovering above a power plant. Other power stations were targeted as well, including the Chernobyl nuclear power station, just 60 miles from Kiev and the shortest route to the capital, raising fears of an even greater disaster. Ukraine's president held an emergency meeting with his top staff, pledging the fight will go on.
What Ukrainians should do: help the national defense, join the national armed forces, territorial defense. Anyone with experience in the army. It's really important, and we will not let the enemy go any further on our territory.
Russian armoured personnel carriers and other military vehicles crossed the border from Belarus into Ukraine as President Putin's forces attempted to take control. Military trucks also seen heading north from Crimea, annexed in 2014. And tanks rolled through cities including Sumy, heralding a new phase in this escalating crisis.
We now have war in Europe on a scale and of a type we thought belonged to history. NATO allies condemn Russia's invasion of Ukraine in the strongest possible terms. It is a blatant violation of international law.
In the capital, streets usually teeming with people became quiet. Not deserted, but fundamentally different to just 24 hours earlier. Within hours, it was clear a mass exodus had started. This man and his family told us they'd try to get onto a train heading west. He said he was giving up, though, and going home. Without a car, you're stuck, he told me. The main roads heading out of Kiev were suddenly jammed with traffic. Miles and miles of queues. People getting out of buses for a break before continuing on. These women said they and everyone on the bus was heading to the west, and maybe then onto Poland and safety.
Well, for weeks now, people have been telling us that nothing's going to happen, that they're going to stay in Kiev, they're going to stay in their homes. But it has happened, and this is the effect. It's logjam here. This is the main road to western Ukraine. As you can see, we're in a massive, massive parking lot now.
Queues began to form outside petrol stations and then at banks and cash machines, people withdrawing their savings and attempting to head away from the Russian forces. There has been plenty of defiance in Ukraine in recent days. On the streets, a few hardy souls came out to support the nation, the flag carried with pride. But in the face of the Russian army, there's not much more that they can do. Stuart Ramsey, Sky News, Kiev.
The first reports of explosions came in the early hours of yesterday morning in Kharkiv, the country's second largest city, which is less than 20 miles from Russia. More were then heard in Mariupol, a port city just 6 miles south of the Donbass region, which is controlled by pro-Russian separatists. From there, Sky correspondent Alex Rossi reports.
It is a terrifying constant thunder. Explosions booming across this coastal city. It's been going on for hours now. And this is a population in shock. They just stop and stand, traumatized by a war they did not start and do not want. In the distance, artillery rains down on Ukrainian positions. The defense of the outskirts may not last long. Some families grab what they can. This little girl carries her bucket and spade. There have already been attacks on civilian areas, this place targeted by rockets, presumably to terrorize the population.
Happened about half an hour ago. Lots of people live here. Quite a few of the windows of the houses have been blown out by the blast. The front lines are over in that direction.
There is a huge amount of destruction here, and people are worried there could be another salvo at any time.
You see all the broken glass and brickwork down here. This is where this man lives.
Jacob shows me inside his house. It's been wrecked. His great-grandson was hit by shrapnel as he slept.
13 лет. И что случилось? Кисть вот так вот. Вот, смотрите, кровь какая, вот.
There are still signs of life in the city centre, but this is not normal. They're trying to get supplies. No one here knows when the Russians will arrive, but they can hear the fighting is getting closer.
There is a feeling of absolute dread in this city. Over the last 5 minutes, we've heard the sound of very intense artillery barrages on the outskirts. Now, some people are coming out.
You can hear it there. They're queuing at this ATM for money. They're also stocking up on supplies at the supermarket, checking their phones, calling their relatives, really worried about what is going to happen next.
In the queue, waiting patiently, we find Margarita. She's frightened, but defiant.
Конечно, оставаться. Мы город не собираемся покидать. Это наша страна, это наш город, мы его любим.
Ukrainian forces are trying to fight, setting up positions now inside the city. But as we filmed, the war felt very close. With bombs dropping, families hunkered down in damp and gloomy basements. They don't know when this storm of fire will pass. Ludmila, a mother of two, still can't understand why Russia wants to destroy her country.
So, I want to stop that for a second, guys. You know, you see this Sky News, they're playing one side. You know, they're showing you one side of this. They are showing the Ukrainians as victims. You know, in this, sometimes we have to look at it as not really taking either side, just trying to understand what the heck is going on. And so, like I said, there was a great report done by Vladimir Putin. He basically came out and he tells you why he is decided to, you know, carry out the invasion. I'm going to show you a little bit of that, just Putin's report, basically. See if I can pull that up. I'll find that for you here. But this is Vladimir Putin giving his side, or at least his explanation as to why he decided to go in to first the Donbass region, and then, you know, and then ultimately into the entire area of the Ukraine. I'm setting that up now. Let me pull that up for you here. Trying to get that set up for you now, so bear with me 1 second. But I think it's important for you to see this video. This will kind of give you an idea as to why, you know, a lot of people are wondering, and the news keeps saying, well, why would he do this? And, oh, he's a psycho and all of this stuff. But again, if you understand the long history of Kiev, of the Ukraine and Russia, then that will help you to understand what Vladimir Putin's thoughts were and why he did what he did. This is part of a show that I did yesterday. I won't play the whole show, so don't worry if you've already seen it. You won't have to see it all again. But if you haven't seen it, watch the whole show. But here is part of that show now. Let me get to that point where I start to show you the speech of Vladimir Putin. Recent speech of President Putin of Russia, giving his reasons for the moves he's making and his reasons that he feels NATO and the United States have infringed, or at least are threatening to infringe, upon the national sovereignty and boundaries of Russia. So here it is.
Many Ukrainians' airfields are positioned close to our borders, and strategic NATO airplanes using high-precision weapons can strike targets in Volgograd, Samar, and Kazan, and Astrakhan. Using reconnaissance tool will allow NATO to control the airspace of Russia up until the Urals. And finally, after the U.S. withdrew from the INF Treaty, the Pentagon has openly started developing a whole range of the land-based missiles with a range of 5,500 kilometers. If such systems are deployed in Ukraine, they can hit the targets in the European Russia and also behind the Urals. And the travel time of the Tomahawk missiles to Moscow will be less than 35 minutes. Ballistic missiles, 7-8 minutes. And the hyper-offensive weapons, 4-5 minutes. done previously when they expanded NATO to the east, moving infrastructure, military infrastructure closer to our borders, ignoring our protests and our warnings. They just didn't care about that. They did whatever they deemed necessary and appropriate. And I believe they plan to continue doing like that. Russia did everything it could to keep the territorial integrity of Ukraine. We tried hard to implement the resolution of the Security Council of UN 2202 that endorsed the Minsk agreements on resolving the situation in Donbass. But everything was done in vain. The presidents are changing, the parliament members are changing, but the idea of the aggressive regime is still the same, regime that seized the power in Kyiv. It was created by the coup d'etat of 2014, and those who chose the way of violence, they admit they see no other way to resolve the Donbas crisis other than the military way. In this regard, I deem it necessary to make a decision that should have been made a long time ago, to immediately recognize the independence and sovereignty of Donetsk People's Republic and Lugansk People's Republic. And I would like to request the Federal Assembly to support, to back this decision and ratify the agreement of friendship and mutual help with both republics. We will draft this document and sign these documents in the near future.
I don't see how you see any fault in Putin, what he's saying. I mean, it's all historically true. Stalin's horrible, Lenin's horrible, we're sorry what we did to you, blah, blah, blah. What do you want to, I mean, you know it's coming. You want to be under George Soros or you want to be your own country? We don't want you. We want to do business with you. Just please don't go to war with us. I mean, and to hear somebody actually tell the truth from that level is powerful, because the truth is powerful and the truth lives at InfoWars. Well, perfect timing. As we speak, Vladimir Putin has just taken the podium, and here on the Alex Jones Show, we're going to go to this announcement by the Russian leader about the ongoing conflict in Eastern Europe in the proxy war that is Ukraine. Here it is.
Of course, my address is also aimed at our fellow citizens in Ukraine. We'll have to have a substantive and detailed conversation because the matter is very serious. Situation in Donbass is becoming critical. And today I'm addressing you directly, not only to talk about what's happening, but also to inform you about the decisions we're making, about possible steps in this regard. Once again, I would like to underscore that Ukraine is not just a neighboring country to us. It is an inherent part of our own history, culture, spiritual space. They are our comrades, relatives, not only colleagues, friends, but also our family, people we have blood and family ties with. Since ancient times, people from ancient southwestern Russian lands were calling themselves Russians and Orthodox. That was happening until 17th century, when part of these territories rejoined the Russian Empire, the Russian state. And after that, it seems that we know all about this, that we are talking about facts that everyone knows. But at the same time, we need to have understanding what is happening today to explain motives and aims that Russia has. We need to say a couple of words about the history of this matter. I would like to start by saying that the modern Ukraine was completely created by Russia. To be more exact, by Bolshevik communist Russia. This process has started almost immediately after the 1917 revolution. And Lenin and his supporters did it in a rough way. If we talk about Russia, they were alienating parts of historical territories of Russia. And millions of people who lived there, obviously no one asked anything. Then before the Great Patriotic War and after it, Stalin added to the USSR and handed over to Ukraine some lands that belonged to Poland and Hungary. And as a compensation, Stalin gave some ancient German lands to Poland. And in the 1960s, Khrushchev decided to take Crimea away from Russia and also gave it to Ukraine. That's how the territory of the Soviet Ukraine was formed. But now I would like to draw your attention to the initial stages of the establishment of the USSR. I think it's of utmost importance for us because we have to start from afar. I would like to remind you that after the October Revolution of 1917 and the civil war that followed, Bolsheviks started building a new state. And they had some differences among them. Stalin, who in 1922 was at the same time Secretary General of the Soviet Communist Party and People Commissar on the matters of ethnicities, decided to build the country on the principles of autonomy, thus giving to the republics, to the future administrative units, wide authority when they were supposed to join the state. Lenin criticized this plan, and he suggested to make concessions to the nationalists, the way he called them back then advocates of independence. Basically, that was idea about creating a confederation and give the right to every nation for self-determination. That was the basis of the Soviet state. First, in 1922, it was enshrined in the Declaration on the Establishment of the Soviet Union, and then after the death of Lenin, it was also enshrined in the Constitution of the USSR of 1924. And right away, here we have a lot of questions. It raises a lot of questions. And first of them, and the main question, why were they making all kinds of concessions to the nationalists at the outskirts of the former empire, to give to the administrative units that were haphazardly formed huge territories, oftentimes that had nothing to do with them. And they were giving these territories with the population of historic Russia. And these administrative units were given status and shape of the state entities. And once again, this begs a question: why did they have to do such generous gifts even the most blatant nationalists couldn't dream of, and at the same time give the republic a right to withdraw from the new state without any preconditions? At first glance, it doesn't seem clear. It seems like madness, but only at first glance, because there is an explanation. After the revolution, the main goal Bolsheviks had was to keep power, to stay at power at any cost. And for this, they went to any length to sign humiliating conditions of the Brest truce when the Kaiser's Germany were in the dire economic situation and the outcome of the World War I was already almost decided, and by giving any concessions to the nationalists inside the country. From the point of view of the historic destiny of Russia and its people, Lenin's principles of building the state weren't a mere mistake. That was much worse than a mere mistake. After the collapse of the Soviet Union in 1991, this has become absolutely obvious. Of course, what happened in the past cannot be changed, but at least we have to talk about it in honest and direct way, without any political agenda, without giving any political color to it. I can only add that the ideas of the current political realities, no matter how beneficial they might seem currently, under no circumstances cannot and should not be a basis of the building a state. I'm not blaming anyone, accusing anyone of anything.
Okay, this is live, but we can pause it. When we come back, we're going to get through all this. I know I already gave the number out. We're going to get to all your calls, too. Who knows how long Putin's going to go, but we're going to come back and get to it. But again, I've studied history. I've never heard a modern world leader be this honest. I mean, he's like, yeah, we came in and hurt the Ukrainians, but it was ours to begin with. And Lenin gave it all away to begin with. It's always been part of us. And yeah, then we came in and did mean things to him. And yeah, I mean, what do you want it to do? And he's going to probably go on and say, you want to be part of Europe? You want to be part of the New World Order? We are not over there in Russia. They are not attacking us. The same globalists that cut off our pipelines have cut off their pipelines. And it needs to stop. Our enemy is in Hollywood. Our enemy runs Washington, D.C. Our enemy is not Russia. And it's because of that the globalists say they're the main enemy, because Russia has gotten out from the New World Order grasp. It has its own problems. Leave Russia to the Russians. The issue is the Great Reset and Klaus Schwab and the worldwide lockdown and global depression and 40+ million people, they starved to death during that lockdown. I predicted before this even happened, he would say they're going to annex, eastern Ukraine fully, and then if there's any attacks on it, they'll then attack Ukraine. So this is just the beginning of a larger war, in my view. It's a serious situation, and it's the consequences of Soros and the New World Order wanting to start a war with Russia. It's very, very simple, while they sell us out to China and others. All right, let's go back to Putin, who was live when we were watching it. We've now paused it, so it's taped to air, so we can hear what he's saying about what's about to happen in Eastern Europe, in Ukraine. Here it is.
Say that that's how it happened. That's a fact. That's a historical fact. And as a result of Bolsheviks' policy, the Soviet Ukraine was created. And we have every reason to say now that it's Ukraine created by Vladimir Lenin. He's its creator and architect. And it's fully confirmed by the documents from the archives. Also including the decrees, Lenin's decrees regarding Donbass, that was added to Ukraine. And now grateful descendants demolishing all the statues, all the monuments to Lenin. They call it decommunization. You want decommunization? Well, we are quite happy with that. But don't stop halfway. We are ready to show you what would mean actual decommunization for Ukraine. Coming back to the history of the matter, I would like to remind you that back in 1922, at the territory of the former Russian Empire, the Soviet Union was established, but the reality showed that keeping this territory and ruling this territory using the principles of confederation deems impossible, because it had nothing to do neither with the realities nor with the historical tradition. And the Red Terror and switch to the Stalin's purges and the monopoly of the Communist Party, nationalization, planned economy, all that in reality was turned into a formality, nothing more. Principles that were declared but didn't actually work. In reality, Soviet republics had no sovereign rights. None. In practice, what was created, strictly centralized, unitarian in its character. State that was centralized. Stalin implemented not Lenin's ideas, but his own ideas of how state should be built. But changes to the founding acts, to the constitution, he didn't make any changes in this regard. Lenin's principles about building the Soviet Union were not reconsidered technically. It seemed there was no need in this. Under totalitarian regime, authoritarian regime, everything worked well, and it looked nice from the outside. It looked more than democratic even. But still, it's a shame. It's a shame.
Good pause. You have to back this up. Folks, I've been around 48 years, and I've been on here 28 years. And I've seen a lot of crazy stuff. And I knew that Putin started meeting with Solzhenitsyn in the last decade of his life. And I know people that reportedly know Putin and say, no, he's a anti-New World Order InfoWars listener. And I'm not naive. I don't go, oh, Putin must be great. But now you see it more and more. Vladimir Putin repudiating communism, saying it's horrible. He may even come out and say Western powers put Lenin in, because I know Putin knows that now, and that Russia has gotten free from this to a certain extent, and that we need to get free of this globalism as well, these parasites, and then we can have real peace. and an incredible future. I mean, folks, Russia's got 3 times the resources the U.S. does. I mean, it's the richest country in the world. We should have a huge deal with them and be working with them. But again, the globalists don't like that. They want to use the Chinese slave colony to leverage everybody out. They want to implode the third world, starve them to death, to flood the West, so the West collapse, and then have us have a war with the damn Russians. I mean, it's just the stupidest thing you would do for prosperity and peace and a future the world's ever seen. I mean, and look, I'm not somebody that gushes over leaders or people or any of this. And I know Russia's got serious corruption problems and everything else, believe me. But, I mean, everything Putin said so far is dead on historically accurate. He just apologized for the communists taking over Ukraine and killing people. He just said Lenin was horrible. He just said Stalin was horrible. He just said authoritarianism is terrible, and he wants free market, and he wants to work with the world, and he wants to see Ukraine be separate from Russia. He doesn't want to run Ukraine. He wants to do business with Ukraine. It's just incredible. So we'll see if he announces he's taken over the east of Ukraine, and that if the West attacks those people, he'll defend them, hopefully trying to end the war with the threat of military action by showing strength. I mean, I don't see any fault with this. And compared to other world leaders, I mean, he's telling the truth. And this is a big deal, folks. I mean, this is Putin straight shooting the world. And, of course, they're not going to play it on most of the channels. They'll take it out of context. But this is really the truth about what happened in Ukraine, the history of it, and the rest of it. Let's hear the rest.
Article 17 of the Constitution of Ukraine doesn't allow military bases of foreign states to be deployed in their territory, but it seems that it can be bypassed. They have deployed training missions of the NATO countries in Ukraine. Basically, that's a military base already. They just call it a mission, and it's done. In Kyiv, they have long declared strategic aim at joining NATO. Yes, obviously, every country had the right to choose their own alliances, to sign military agreements. That's true, but there is one. But in international law, it says there is a principle of indivisible security, which states that one country cannot enhance its security at the expense of security of others. And I can refer here to the European Security OSCE Charter that was adopted in Istanbul in 1999 and Astana OSCE Declaration from 2010. In other words, choosing means to enhance one's security should not create any threats for other states, and if Ukraine was to join NATO, would serve as a direct threat to the security of Russia. And I would remind you, back in April of 2018 at the Bucharest summit of the North Atlantic Treaty Organization, USA forced these members to make a decision that certain states were to join NATO. A lot of European allies already back then understood all the risks of such a step, but they had to subdue to the will of their older partner. Americans used them to pursue anti-Russian policy. Some NATO members still are skeptical about Ukraine joining NATO, and from some European capitals we get a signal. They are saying, so what are you worrying about? It's not going to happen tomorrow. And now our American counterparts are saying the same. We say, okay, it is not going to happen tomorrow, but the day after tomorrow then, what will it change? In historical context, nothing. More than that, we know the stance and the statements of the U.S. leadership about the active confrontation military actions in the east of Ukraine would not stop Ukraine to join NATO if it will correspond to the criteria of the NATO Charter and if they can overcome corruption. And they try to convince us that NATO is a peaceful and defensive bloc, so there is no threat for Russia. And they, again, suggest we believe their words, but we already know the value of such words. Back in 1990, when we talked about uniting Germany, the USA promised to the Soviet leadership that neither jurisdiction nor military presence would not move an inch to the east, and unification of Germany would not lead to the eastward expansion of NATO. And I'm quoting here. So they were saying all these things, they were giving us assurances, but these were just words. Later, they started saying that Central European and Eastern European countries joining NATO will improve their relations with Moscow, will rid these countries from the fears of their difficult historical legacy. And more than that, it will allow them to create this belt of the friendly nations. But it was the other way around. These states are now bringing their stereotypes, their complexes of the Russian threat to NATO. They insisted on increasing potential of collective security that was supposed to be deployed against Russia, first of all. And it was happening back in the 1990s and early 2000s when, because of the openness and goodwill, our goodwill, relations between Russia and the West were at high level. Russia fulfilled all its obligations, withdrew troops from Germany, from the Central and Eastern European countries, and it made a huge contribution in overcoming the legacy of the Cold War. We consistently suggested all kinds of cooperation, including in the format of the Russian NATO Council and OSCE. More than that, I will say one thing that I have never said before in public. I will say it for the first time. Back in 2000, when President Bill Clinton was visiting Moscow at the end of his term, I asked him, how would America see Russia joining NATO?
I want you to listen to this real quick. Listen to this real closely. This is Russia. This is Vladimir Putin in 2000 meeting with Bill Clinton. And he states he's asking about joining NATO. Okay? So listen to what Vladimir Putin says. Listen to this close. I thought this was very interesting. I did not know this. Very interesting.
Russia, first of all. And it was happening back in the 1990s and early 2000s when, because of the openness and goodwill, our goodwill, relations between Russia and the West were at high level. Russia fulfilled all its obligations, withdrew troops from Germany, from the Central and Eastern European countries, and it made a huge contribution in overcoming the legacy of the Cold War. We consistently suggested all kinds of cooperation, including in the format of the Russian NATO Council and OSCE. More than that, I will say one thing that I have never said before in public. I will say it for the first time. Back in 2000, when President Bill Clinton was visiting Moscow at the end of his term, I asked him, how would America see Russia joining NATO? I would not give you all the details of that conversation, but the reaction to my conversation looked, well, very reserved, let me put it this way. And how did Americans really look at this possibility? You can see it in their practical steps in regard of our country. Open support of the terrorists in North Caucasus, ignoring our demands and our concerns in the security area, withdrawing from the treaties, arms treaties, and so on and so forth. It still begs the question, why? Why did they do that? What for? Okay, you don't want to see a friend in us, an ally in us, but why do you want to make an enemy out of us? The only answer that we got was, it's not about our political regime or anything else. It's just they don't need such a big and independent country as Russia. So that's the answer to all the question. That's the source of traditional American policy they pursue in the Russian track. That's why they react like this to all our proposals about security. You only need to look at the map to see how did the Western countries keep their word about non-expansion of NATO eastwards. They just lied to us. We had 5 waves of NATO expansion. In 1999, Poland, Czech Republic, Hungary were joined NATO. In 2004, Bulgaria, Estonia, Lithuania, Slovakia, Romania, and Slovenia. In 2009, Albania and Croatia. In 2017, Montenegro. And 2020, North Macedonia. As a result, the alliance, its military infrastructure, has drawn really close to the borders of Russia. That's one of the reasons, of the key reasons of the security crisis. It affected the entire system of international relations. The mutual trust was lost. The situation continues to get worse in strategic area as well. In Romania and in Poland, as part of the U.S. project, they deploy anti-missile defensive systems. We all know that the launchers deployed there can be used for cruise missiles Tomahawk. That is a strike weapon, strike system. And USA is also developing Standard 6 missile. It can not only be used as an anti-missile defensive tool, it can strike at targets on land and on the sea. So they are expanding their infrastructure and they get new offensive capabilities. From the information that we get, we have every reason to believe that further deploying the sites, the facilities of North Atlantic Treaty Organization, this decision has already been made. That's just a matter of time. We understand clearly that under this scenario, the level of military threat for Russia will be increased manifold. I would like to draw your attention once again that there will be a bigger threat of immediate attack against our country. In American strategic documents, in their doctrine, there is such a possibility of preventive work against the missile complexes of the adversary. And who is the main adversary of the United States? We all know that, Russia. In NATO documents, our country is officially directly called a main threat to the North Atlantic security. And Ukraine will serve as the platform for such an offense. If our ancestors heard about that, they would probably thought that it's impossible. We don't want to believe that either, but that's how it is now. I want people from Russia and Ukraine to understand that. Many Ukrainians' airfields are positioned close to our borders, and strategic NATO airplanes using high-precision weapons can strike targets in Volgograd, Samar, and Kazan and Astrakhan. Using reconnaissance tool will allow NATO to control the airspace of Russia up until the Urals. And finally, after the U.S. withdrew from the INF Treaty, the Pentagon has openly started developing a whole range of the land-based missiles with a range of 5,500 kilometers. If such systems are deployed in Ukraine, they can hit the targets in the European Russia and also behind the Urals. And the travel time of the Tomahawk missiles to Moscow will be less than 35 minutes. Ballistic missiles, 7-8 minutes. And the hypersonic offensive weapons, 4-5 minutes. That's like having a knife against our throat. And I have no doubt they plan to implement these ideas. And as it has been done previously when they expanded NATO to the east, moving infrastructure, military infrastructure closer to our borders, ignoring our protests and our warnings, they just didn't care about that. They did whatever they deemed necessary and appropriate. And I believe they plan to continue doing like that, because they see us as a dog barking at the caravan. We have never agreed to that, and we never will. Russia was always standing for resolving the most difficult issues at the negotiating table. Diplomatically, we understand our responsibility for global stability. Back in 2008, Russia has come up with an initiative on signing an agreement about European security. And its gist was that no state, no international organization in European Atlantic could not enhance its security at the expense of security of others. But our suggestion was refuted from the get-go, because we can't allow Russia to limit the activities of NATO. We were told that legally binding guarantees of security, only NATO members can have such guarantees. And last December, we have sent our partners the draft document about security guarantees, and also the draft agreement on the measures of enhancing Russian security and NATO member security. In response, NATO members and the US were saying a lot of words. There was some reasonable ideas, but they were talking only about secondary things. And it looked as an attempt to bring this
So if you want to watch that whole report, guys, go to my channel, like I said, on Rumble, and it's called Wars and Rumors of War, Globalist Push for World War III. That is the report I did just this morning. I believe I just uploaded that, but it'll kind of break down. There's a lot more to it. It's about an hour and 13 minutes long, but there's a great report that I covered too from Imprimis, from a college professor concerning on how to think about Vladimir Putin and so on. So that's something that I would suggest maybe you get a chance to take a look at it. I want to also go over, let me pull up another report that I wanted to show you. There's several things going on. There's a lot of news going on, so I'm trying to cover a good portion of it. And right now, I wanted to show you a news report. Let's see if I can pull it up here real quick. Because with all of this going on, it looks as though China pretty much is siding, somewhat anyway, with Russia. And here's a report from the Washington Examiner. China's support for Russia turns Ukraine into battleground for New World Order. So I thought it was kind of interesting that they use the term New World Order, because one of the things is, ever since I've been reporting in 2009, basically in most of the reports that I've talked about, I've said that basically it's a battle for this New World Order between the East and the West. You know, the NATO countries and all the European countries and the United States against, the Russia and China section, and even parts of the Middle East like Iran and so on. And it seems like they use the Middle East as a buffer zone in between, and so they always keep conflicts going on there. But now we've seen like a de-escalation of conflicts in those areas. You don't really hear much, even between Israel and the Palestinians and so on right now, or at least you don't hear a lot of it in the news. But in this report, they're saying China has given tacit approval for Russian President Vladimir Putin's latest invasion of Ukraine in the judgment of U.S. officials as part of a joint effort to undermine the institutions that American and Allied leaders established to minimize conflict in the decades following World War II. And so they're obviously talking about NATO and the United Nations and so on. And they're basically saying that they set these things up to stop war. This is supposedly, the United Nations is supposed to be this organism for peace, but if you look up events that have taken place by the United Nations over the years, there's been a lot of atrocities and rapes and murders and things going on in countries that they go to supposedly help. And I have some reports like that on my YouTube channel if you look them up. But it says Russia and the PRC, People's Republic of China, also want a world order. This is what State Department spokesman Ned Price said on Wednesday. But it is an order that is and would be profoundly illiberal. It is an order that is in many ways destructive rather than addictive. And it's funny that they say that because at the same time, our country and the European countries don't seem to really go against China when they have Uyghurs in concentration camps or, torturing people and things of this nature. They have no problem with China. But at the same time, now all of a sudden, not really all of a sudden, but, now they're saying, oh, look, they're vying for a new world order as well. It says China and Russia have made a show of their alignment over the last several years, culminating in the release this month of a communique that outlined a wide range of plans for economic and diplomatic cooperation, including the Kremlin's support for Beijing's claim to sovereignty over the island democracy of Taiwan, and Chinese General Secretary Xi Jinping's support for restriction on NATO activities in Europe. Price declined to draw an explicit inference from that statement that China supports Russia in the brewing war, though his Defense Department counterpart didn't shy from voicing an ominous conclusion. So now they're stating that Russia is supporting China's possible invasion of Taiwan, possibly, and China seems to be approving of Russia's invasion of the Ukraine. So here's the thing. It's a real, in my opinion, a pretty complicated issue concerning this invasion of Ukraine, because if you go by the reports that Vladimir Putin and Russia are presenting, they're stating that Ukraine has been abusing and infringing upon the Donetsk region and Lugansk region, or Luhansk region, the Donbass, over a period of 8 years, and shelling into that area and making incursions into that area, and basically abusing the pro-Russian separatists. So this is the reason that, of course, Vladimir Putin is saying they have invaded. But here's what the Defense Department said. They said the February 4th statement, and let me pull that up on the screen, that Xi and Putin put out was certainly we took as task. Spokesman John Kirby told the reporters. Chinese officials have sent mixed signals about the crisis in recent days. Chinese Foreign Minister Wang Yi mentioned Ukraine by name last week when he affirmed that the sovereignty, independence, and territorial integrity of all countries should be respected and safeguarded from assault. And he says, and that applies equally to the Ukraine. He told the Munich Security Conference, if anyone questions China's attitude on this matter, it is ill-intended sensationalism and a distortion of China's position. So the United States, as we can see, is basically saying that China is just outright backing Russia's invasion of the Ukraine, whereas China is basically stating all nations have a right to sovereignty and protection. So it's almost like they're not really saying they are or not supporting it. And then it goes on to say that the foreign minister also said Saturday that Russia's reasonable security concerns should be respected and taken seriously, in an apparent reference to Putin's demand that the Ukraine be barred from joining NATO. Yet Putin on Tuesday announced that Russia seeks not merely Ukrainian neutrality, but also a demilitarization of the modern Ukraine to a certain degree. Because again, as you've seen in the speech that Putin recently gave right before this invasion, he was basically stating that the Ukraine is like right on their border and it's a matter of national security. If NATO comes in and takes, or if, the Ukraine becomes part of NATO and so on. And it says President Joe Biden's administration has hoped that the threat of economic sanctions would dissuade Putin from launching a major offensive. But the U.S. and European allies began imposing these sanctions Tuesday as Putin claimed the right to partition the Donbass region of eastern Ukraine on behalf of so-called separatists who have masked the Russian presence over the last 8 years. China responded by blaming the United States for the crisis. And see, that's another thing. There has always been reports that there have been Russian troops in the Donbass region. They're claiming that there were snipers or special ops guys. And yet the Donbass People's Republic, or the Donetsk People's Republic and the Luhansk People's Republic, the pro-Russian separatists, are claiming that the United States has American mercenaries, they call them, in those regions helping the Ukrainians. It says, on the Ukraine issue, the United States has been sending weapons to Ukraine, heightening tensions, creating panic, and even hyping up the possibility of warfare. This is what Chinese Foreign Minister spokesman Huan Chunying said. It says a key question here is what the role the U.S. culprit of current tensions surrounding Ukraine has played. If someone keeps pouring oil on the flame while accusing others of not doing their best to put out the fire, such kind of behavior is clearly irresponsible and immoral. So, like I said, it's kind of more of a complex situation. It's not just a one side is good or necessarily one side is bad. It's just your point of view on how you look at it. And really, I think being able to look at both sides and trying to understand each side's point of view and what their goals are certainly helps in making an estimation on somewhat who's good and who's bad, you could say. It says, we wonder, Western officials hope that China, notwithstanding Xi's much-touted partnership with Putin, might feel an incentive to take a more cooperative line with respect to the Ukraine crisis. Chinese communists have anchored their objections to de facto diplomatic ties between Taiwanese officials and other governments and their claim to sovereignty over the island, which has been a disputed matter between Taipei and the mainland Chinese regime since the CCP victory in the Chinese Civil War of 1949. We wonder, it says, can it really be the Chinese policy now to support separatist movements over the sovereignty of nation states, said Kirby. That's an interesting twist, isn't it? The Chinese Foreign Ministry's statement seemed to spur the Biden administration to reflect aloud on the Russian invasion of Ukraine, not only as a security catastrophe within Europe, but also literal battleground within a widening watershed in global politics. So, guys, this is, in my opinion, right now, it's not so big. It's right there between Ukraine and Russia. But again, we don't know how that's going to square out once the sanctions start kicking in. We also don't know how China is going to react now over the next few weeks. We don't know if they are also planning to now go into Taiwan possibly, and then what problems that would bring, because then, of course, this rogue administration that we have, would they then just start putting sanctions on China as well? Are we going to just have sanctions on everybody and nobody's buying and selling? I mean, it's crazy. But this is what's happening. A lot of different things happening. And also, I'm going to show you a few shortcuts of just different things happening in Kiev for those who haven't seen it yet. This is a video. Let me pull it up. These are some shorts. And I'm just going to show them on the screen. This is a Russian aircraft shot down in Kiev. If you can't see it, I'll pull it up here. I'm not going to expand it, but this is on YouTube. But you can see they're saying it was a Russian aircraft shot down in Kiev.
What's your hurry, son? What's your hurry, son? Let me see your driver's license.
I want to see your driver's license. Come on.
What's your hurry, son?
Here's another. This is a Russian helicopter that reportedly has been shot down near Kiev as well in Ukraine. You can see the explosion there. It's not very big. I apologize. So, short and simple, people. Here is a swarm of helicopters. This is from the Sun.
This is an iPhone 11 Pro from Back Market. They specialize in refurbished.
We don't want to see that. We want to see the helicopters.
Вже штук 20 пролетіло. Не видно українського герба. Точно російські. Прямо над хатами. Прямо ось над хатами літають, падли. Полетіли в сторону Аеропорта, бомблять аеропорт, чути, що йде бій. Вже штук 30 нарахував точно.
Блядь, их тут реально дохуя. Вот еще летят. Это пиздец.
So this is in Ukraine. This is near Kiev. These are Russian helicopters. In the assault, you see some explosions.
И таких штук 30. Капец, он седает. Да. Таких уже штук 30, наверное, пролетело.
So that's just some more footage. A lot of things going on, guys. So there is also some reports out. One other thing. It is... I'm going to show you one other thing that's happening, if I can find it real quick. If you ever heard of continuity of government, there we have what we call a U.S. nuclear bomb sniffer plane that the United States have. And so this comes out of the UK Times. I'll pull this up for you real quick. Blocked because of ad blocker. It seems that you are using some kind of blocking software, which is preventing the page from fully loading. Oh, come on. All right. Anyway, let me see if I can pull up another page because this one's blocking me. But anyway, the United States has what they call a bomb sniffer. According to the U.S. Air Force, it's used to take samples from the atmosphere to detect nuclear explosions on board. And as the aircraft tend to return to the United States shortly after deployment, the constant Phoenix's visit to the United Kingdom is considered a rarity. The aircraft was built to detect nuclear radioactivity in the atmosphere. So they're stating that this is it was spotted in Britain. They are looking possibly and preparing for a possible nuclear threat. And some of the reports are saying that they weren't there for that reason, but why would they be? What reason would they be there for other than that? We've got a freaking war breaking out in Ukraine, but they're saying, oh, well, we don't have the planes over there for that reason. What's it over there for? Getting an oil change? You know, it's possible, but I doubt it. And then in other news, let me pull up here. This is from today. I want to show you, this is actually from the Black Conservative Patriot. Pretty good site. He has some breaking news. And I'm going to try to pull it up now if it'll come up. But if you've never watched his reports, he has some pretty good reports. So I'm going to pull it up here. And here.
Thank you for joining us tonight via telephone. You're watching this unfold. Your reaction to Putin's threat if any Western nation or any nation intervenes with this Russian military action.
Here's the most important thing to we the people. Americans and my fellow brothers and sisters in NATO nations with regards to what Putin has said regarding his invasion this morning, Ukrainian time, the invasion of Russia into Ukraine.
Come on. Sorry about that, guys.
A couple of those who would be tempted to intervene, Russia will respond immediately and you will have consequences that you have never had before in your history. As for the military sphere, modern Russia, even after the collapse of the USSR and the loss of significant power, loss of a significant part of its nuclear potential, is today one of the most powerful nuclear powers. And moreover, it has certain advantages in a number of the latest types of weapons. In this regard, no one should have any doubt that a direct attack on Russia will lead to defeat and dire consequences for a potential aggressor. He is making it very clear in his threat that he would use nuclear retaliation against the U.S. and NATO if they interfere with his attack on Ukraine. Quote, continuing, Putin, all responsibility for bloodshed will be on the conscience of the ruling regime in Ukraine. I urge you to immediately lay down your weapons and go home. All servicemen of the Ukrainian army who fulfill this demand will be able to freely leave the combat zone and return to their families. So let's zero in on Russian President Vladimir Putin telling U.S. and NATO that there will be dire consequences for a potential aggressor if they attack Russia. Attack Russia in Ukraine or attack Russia at home. This announcement was made, and interestingly enough, he was wearing the same clothes that he wore the other day when he announced that he was going to recognize the separatist parts of the Donbas region in Ukraine. Obviously, it was
Sorry about that. It keeps
recorded
off for some reason.
And we also have that the Doomsday plane is an official denomination of a class of warcraft which is used as an airborne command post in event of a nuclear war, disaster, or other large-scale conflict that threatens key military and government infrastructure. The only countries that have designed and manufactured such aircraft are the United States and the Russian Federation. The Doomsday plane set off from MacDill Air Force Base earlier today from MacDill Air Force Base in Florida. All right, folks, let's get into this episode.
Welcome to Open Source News.
All right.
Please
well, I'm not going to go through his whole episode. I would suggest that you go to Black Conservative Patriot, subscribe to his channel. He has some good reports. You can check it out. I do a lot of reports, but I can't report on everything, obviously. So having a variety of reporters in your repertoire is a good thing, to have. So that's an important thing. So I want to go over something real quick, guys. If you haven't considered this, I want to break something down real quick. I hope you will bear with me. But I was looking in the book of Revelation, because a lot of times we all start thinking about these things. And if you go to chapter 6, it starts to talk about the seals and the scroll with 7 seals that comes forth. And it says, and I saw when the Lamb opened one of the seals, and I heard, as it were, one of the 4 living creatures saying with a loud voice like thunder, come and see. And I looked, and behold, a white horse, and he who sat on it had a bow, and a crown was given to him, and he went out conquering and to conquer. What that noise is here. One of the things I want to say about that is this is the continuation of man's government in that sense. That white horse going out and has a crown and a bow. That's reminiscent of, if you think about Nimrod, who had a bow and he was in opposition to the Almighty. But these governments want to imitate the Almighty in some ways. So there it says it's a white horse going forth. You got to remember later on in Revelation, the Messiah comes forth on a white horse. So this is not the same white horse, but this is an imitation of righteousness. But these governments come forth with a crown, with some type of royalty, indicating that they are governments, and at the same time with a bow, which indicates war. And we always see how these governments go forth conquering and to conquer. And that's kind of reminiscent of that first seal and how governments from that time went forth. And at that time, it was around the time of the Roman Empire rising, during the time that Yochanan or John wrote this, the Revelator. And then, so you got that first seal going out, and these nations, these governments going forth to conquer, using the crown and the bow, war and government. And it says, the second seal, it says, and when he had opened the second seal, I heard a second creature say, come and see. And there went out another horse that was red. And it was granted to him who sat upon him to take peace from the earth, and that they should kill one another. And there was given to him a great sword. And so that is a time of war. And, throughout history, we have seen different periods of war. Remember, the Messiah, at one point when he was with his disciples, and they asked him, when is the end of the age, and when is this going to be? He said, look, you're going to hear of wars and rumors of wars and nation against nation. He said, but don't be troubled, for the time is not yet. So there's going to be a period of time where there are going to be different wars and rumors of wars and things of this nature. But once these seals start being released, there's going to be an escalation of that, and a time of turmoil and war and killing. And then this third seal says, and when he had opened the third seal, I heard the third creature say, come and see. And I looked, and behold, a black horse, and he who sat on it had a pair of scales in his hand. And I heard a voice in the midst of these four living creatures saying, a measure of wheat for a penny, and 3 measures of barley for a penny, and see that you do not hurt the oil in the wine. A lot of people, don't really understand this one, but back in them times, a day's wages, that's pretty much equivalent to a whole day's wages. So what it's showing is it's going to be a time of great inflation, a time of high prices, great inflation, basically. It says, but see that you hurt not the oil in the wine. So we're starting to see that as well. Yeah, and again, I'm not making specific declarations of how these prophecies are going, but just something to remember that there is going to come a time where we are going to go through a great time of tribulation, and there's going to be a great time of war. But it looks like these elites are taking advantage of this, again, as a distraction, partly for what's going on, but they're trying to push this great reset. So if you go back to Maurice Strong, who was a UN Secretary General back in the 90s, he basically wrote a report in a novel, and in that novel he stated that they have to get all the different nations to sign on to this sustainable development, which is Agenda 21, which is now Agenda 2030, with the carbon taxing and the reduction to zero of the carbon footprint and all this stuff. And he said the only way they can do that, he says, these countries won't sign on. And we see that. Right now they still can't get agreements for everybody to sign these deals. And he stated the only way to really do that would be to get these countries to collapse economically, to collapse the industrialized nations, he said, in order to draw them into more of an international form of government or world government that we sometimes call the New World Order. And so that's one of the things. So let's look at verse 7. He says, and when he had opened up the fourth seal, I heard a voice of the fourth living creature say, come and see. And he said, and I looked, and behold, a pale horse, And the name of him who sat upon it was Death, and Sheol, the grave, followed with him, and power was given to him over a fourth part of the earth to kill with the sword, with hunger, and with pestilence. The same was under the authority of the beast of the earth. And so, just simply put, if you go back into the book of Revelation and you talk about the beasts are kings or nations. And so you go through history, you go back to Egypt, and then Assyria, and then Babylon, and then Medo-Persia, and then Greece, and now Rome. And then it rose up as a military might, now comes back up as the Holy Roman Empire under the power of the Vatican and the papacy. And so then it says 1/4 of the earth falls under this power to kill with the sword, with death, with pestilence, and disease. So you think about our current situation and what's happening and what's happened in the last 2 years, and now what's developing. This is not something to just gloss over, people, and I'm not saying this is exact fulfillment of particular things, but what I'm saying is sooner or later, if you believe these prophecies, they will come to pass. And we are inching further and further closer to a great conflagration and the possibility of world war. Never think that it can't happen. We don't want it to happen, but never just sit there and think, oh, that can't happen. It's kind of what the Almighty was saying when you go back to some of the kingdoms. You think about Babylon when Nebuchadnezzar had built his kingdom, and he looked at how great his kingdom was, and he just thought, hey, I've built this kingdom. It's great. It can't be taken down. I'm just the greatest guy there is, and so on. And then that's when the Almighty humbled him, and his kingdom was overthrown. And so by the Medes and Persians. So and so that's the thing that we have to remember, is that our country isn't too great that it can't fall. It's not too big to fail. Okay, like the banking systems and the elites, how they push the banking system, say they're too big to fail. Well, we're not too big to fail. Unless we humble ourselves, we will at some point probably fall. And but also then it just goes on to say, and when I had opened the fifth seal, I saw under the altar the souls of the men slain because of the word of Yahweh, and because of the two witnesses. And they cried with a loud voice, saying, how long, O Yahweh, holy and true, until you judge and avenge our blood on those who dwell upon the earth? And a white robe was given to them, all these people who had died because of the word of the testimony that they had held in withstanding the beast system, basically, and not accepting its mark or its worshiping its image, basically. It says white robes were given to them until they should rest for a little season, until their fellow servants and brothers who would be killed as they were should be completed. And then when they opened the sixth seal, there was a great earthquake, and the sun became black as sackcloth of hair, and the moon turned to blood, and the stars of heaven fell on the earth as a fig tree drops its untimely figs, and so on. And the heavens departed like a scroll rolled together, and every mountain. This sounds like nuclear war in some ways, people. Stars falling from heaven, and the sky opening up, and a great earthquake. And it says the kings of the earth, and the great men, and the rich men, and the chief captains, and the mighty men, and every bondsman and free man, and sought protection for themselves in the rocks, right? And under the rocks and in the caves and so on. We think about that. You could look at that symbolically as their governments and their assemblies, people running to their churches and the houses of worship, and people seeking their governments for protection, but they're not going to protect you. And they were saying, fall upon us and protect us from the face of him who sits on the throne and from the wrath of the Lamb, for the great day of his wrath has come, and who will be able to stand? And I'm not trying to get into a big sermon or anything, guys, but I just wanted to remind people that if you believe in Scripture, if you believe in the Bible, there is a time coming, a great time of tribulation such as never was, nor shall ever be, the Messiah said. And we are starting to see the nations raging. And at some point it says Satan is cast down to the earth, having great wrath, for he knows that his time is short. And so just be aware of that and get yourself mentally, physically, and spiritually prepared, because, you only have one life to live. It's appointed for man once to die, and then comes the judgment, right? So currently we have this ongoing wave of invasion in Russia into Ukraine, and we have the United States and them standing up against it with sanctions only so far, but they are pushing troops over into the NATO countries. And of course, the mainstream news is trying to make it out that Trump is praising Putin and on his side and yelling, "Let's go, Putin," and all this nonsense, and that's not the case. Trump was simply saying it was a genius move made by Putin, but he said it never would have happened if he had been in office. And they don't tell you that type of stuff. So on the other aspect, we've got an open border that's just out of control. I do want to show you a short video from the New American concerning this. And I want to show you, this is a report from the New American. So I'll pull that up with Ann Vandersteel on the New American and their report. So here is that report now. It's a short report on the border, concerning the border.
Hey guys, Alex Newman here with the New American. We are still at the We Stand America conference. We're very honored to have with us a special guest, Ann Vandersteel. She is the host of Steel Truth. I'm sure you've heard of her. Ann, thank you for being with us. And we're here on the border with Mexico, and all kinds of crazy stuff's going on. But let's start with talking about what's going on the border. Why is that such a big concern? What's happening there?
Well, Alex, I mean, if you've witnessed any of the footage coming out from anybody who's doing anything down here, you see that the Mexicans are sending not their finest over, but it's not just the Mexicans. We have 160 different countries of people coming across the border which intend to do our country harm. And the worst part is there's no resistance. They're welcomed in. Our own National Guard is helping them come across the river on rafts, processing these people. They're being given $200 gift cards or debit cards and a plane ticket to wherever they want to go. There's absolutely zero vetting. We're not testing them for COVID. In fact, we're sending COVID-infected illegals all over the country. And they're not just COVID patients. These are people who have other diseases like tuberculosis and other ailments that are quite infectious. And they're sending this across our country. And yet we have Joe Biden, who is their installed regime, funding the Ukraine border protection to the tune of $255 billion. And he won't finish the wall here, which has been fully funded.
Yeah, I thought that was pretty ironic. The Democrats in Congress seem very concerned about the Ukrainian border and Ukrainian sovereignty, but when it comes to ours, not so much. What do you think the agenda is? Why do you think the Biden administration is encouraging this situation?
Oh, that's very simple. It's the crimes that they have committed in Ukraine, and that Ukraine has been nothing but a giant money laundering slush fund for the Biden regime and all of their cronies associated with the Clinton Foundation. Let's face it, Joe Biden helped install Poroshenko in 2014 in Ukraine after they removed the other president and have helped destroy that country. Look at the amount of money the IMF has sent in there, USAID has sent in there, and where has the money gone? It hasn't gone to the Ukrainians. It has done nothing except fund NGOs, fund the Clinton Foundation, and of course fund their cronies. This is completely anti-humanity. It's not just about America fleecing. This is about the world being raped and pillaged by a global, quote, quotes elite. And if you ask me, they're nothing but a global criminal conspiracy. It's a RICO case that encompasses multiple governments all around the world. In fact, what we're learning, the border is a perfect example of not only human trafficking, weapons trafficking, drug trafficking, chemical jihad by the CCP, but we now understand the trafficking network, which encompasses governments worldwide. And it doesn't matter what they're moving across the border or what they're moving across the network. They already have an established network. These are crimes against all of humanity, and they need to cover it up. And it starts in Ukraine. And that's one of the reasons why we have to have the Russia, Putin boogeyman again. They've got to blame somebody so they can go and destroy the evidence, and that's what it's all about.
Yeah, no kidding. And why do you think they're encouraging this situation on our southern border? I mean, they basically rolled out the red carpet and said, come on over. What do you think their agenda is?
Their agenda is to destroy our electorate and destroy our electorate. And, of course, just continue to create identity politics, degrade our entire election system. Because, again, if we have chaos here and we're looking over there, we're not paying attention to 2022, which we all know 2020 was stolen. The election integrity evidence is massive. It's a tsunami of information that I do hope sees the light of the day in the Supreme Court. And to take a quick...
Right. I'm going to cut that right now for a second. But listen, what I want to say is that you can tell one of the big things that she says that I agree with 100% is the fact that I believe that a lot of this stuff is cover-up. They want to get into the Ukraine. They possibly even want the Ukraine to be overthrown and then that evidence gone. But, you know, it'd be interesting if Putin went in there and somehow secured all that evidence and then used it against the Biden regime. That would be interesting. So, but anyway, guys, I'm going to sign off for now. But that's the situation update. I hope that it was informative. I hope it gave you some insight as to what's happening. We just got to remember and not be distracted by the bigger picture of this great reset that they're pushing. That is the Agenda 2030 program, which John Kerry said they want to have completely set up basically within the next 7 to 8 years now by 2030. And ultimately by 2050, they want to have this whole thing set up. And I have plenty of videos that I've done on this push for New World Order, utilizing the Great Reset with Klaus Schwab and so on. So be sure to check out my Rumble channel and my YouTube channel here. And I have Six Emperor Tyrannus News channel as well. And We're Hit Television is this other channel here. But for now, I'm going to sign off for Six Emperor Tyrannus News. I'm Mark Matheny saying protect your own rights, because if you don't, no one else will. And I do thank you for watching. So take care.